And so a family office will typically have people in-house for a family that invest their money, that, does PR. It sounds crazy, but it's just like, let's say one of your nieces gets in trouble and is going to make the family look bad. They got somebody in-house to go handle that. There's a real estate deal that they want to go get into. They got an expert. There's public equities. They got an expert. There is, venture capital or private equity deal. They got an expert, and they have relationships and they manage these things in-house. And so they look at different types of assets, everything from hard property like real estate, public markets and equities, all the way to like art and collectibles. And so these are really wealthy people, typically have a net worth over $100 million. And
New York, D-Town, LA, NO, Florida, Mississippi, KC, MO, Show 'em what you stand for. Show 'em what you stand for. Show 'em what you stand for. Chi-Town, Tennessee, Carolinas, Alabama, Oakland, St. Louis, Detroit, Atlanta. Show 'em what you stand for. Show 'em what you stand for.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Kings Can Move On podcast. KCMO. You got your big homie Frank the Tank in the house. What's happening?
Hey, everybody, it's a great day to be back on with y'all with the KCMO podcast. Another episode we're bringing you guys. Of course, you got Frank the Tank, you got myself, Lil J over here with another episode. And tonight we're going to dig into some business talk. We deal with everything on this episode, on this podcast, from personal triumphs to tragedies to business talk. So we're going to deal with that tonight. We have a young man coming in all the way from Seattle, Washington, who has quite the background we're going to dig into. I want to welcome to the podcast, Mr. LaSean Smith.
How y'all doing, man?
How you doing, brother?
I am well.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Good to hang.
Today.
Yes, indeed.
So like I said, LaSean, in your intro, you're from Seattle. So first of all, you a football fan?
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks. There
if
you
y'all
go.
ready to dance, I mean, y'all sound like y'all St. Louis in the house. So
no, sir.
Or Kansas City. Kansas
no,
City.
Yes, sir. Yes,
okay,
sir.
okay,
yes,
let's
sir.
get it right. Let's get it right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You with the Super Bowl, the 2-time Super Bowl, 3-time Super Bowl champion, Kansas City Chiefs, 4-time going. Come on now.
All right, let's go. I'm standing strong. There are not many teams that I go hard with, and so I'm ready to get down with my Hawks.
That's good what's up, though. Y'all let Russ cook and let Russ go. So we gotta. So y'all got Gino now. That's what's up. But LaSean, I'm gonna do a Cliff Notes version of your bio with that, and I'm gonna let you expound upon it. But I see you're a U.S. Navy vet. I see you are UCLA grad in professional program in screenwriting. There's bachelor's from Southern Illinois, master's from Arizona State, and then it says an MBA from Georgetown.
Yeah, a lot of classrooms. Everybody don't need to copy that pattern.
For a long time, brother. Golly.
How many years was that? School?
I think most folks should get out and live a little more instead of spending that much time in the classroom.
That's a lot of time reading books.
Yeah. Hopefully you got some scholarship money behind that, dude.
Well, I was in the Navy, so the Navy picked up a big chunk of my education. That's how it rolls.
That's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
That's those benefits of being in the military. I must.
Yeah. And I will say, I've worked big companies, little companies. The reason I like coming, hanging out, meet new folks, having these conversations is there's so many steps along my journey where I stumbled, and people love to show up and say, like, this is what's working, but they don't always talk about what didn't work. And so for me, it's been really about reps. And I just kind of keep showing up and keep showing up. It's that consistency. And I've had many businesses that didn't work. I've had many ideas. I'm like, this is the one. And, it didn't pop off. And I got lucky and fortunate to have some really amazing mentors. And, along my process, it's really been, I started in technology and media. And so my whole world has been kind of the intersection of those two. But when I think about business, it's really about, if you all are familiar with the Naval Ravikant philosophy, there's 4 types of leverage: capital, labor, media, and code. And it's all about trying to figure out which of those levers you're going to apply and which one is right for you. And for me, like I said, I got lucky and showed up in technology when it was just like booming. And even then, I made so many mistakes, and it still worked out, right? And so I didn't make my first $1 million until I was 35. I'm a lot older than that now, but I could have done that at 25 if someone just give me the game, right? And so that's just, to me, that's the whole process here, is just like, how can we kind of teach each other, share what's up, and remind all of ourselves, like, we get lucky, we get support, like we can't put too much, it can't be too heavy on like what we did, right? Sometimes you got in the right place at the right time, you had the right support structure, and you still got to work, but like we need a village to find that success.
I
You know
agree.
what? And I want to hit on that, dog, real quick, man, because you just talked about something that a lot of people want. A lot of people want to try to do a business by themselves, but you hit on something like you are hit your first million at 35. You didn't do it by yourself. You had a mentor. How important were your mentors for you going up in your business?
Yeah. So I love this concept of a personal board of directors, kind of taking that concept that we know from like a corporation and applying it to ourselves. And if you think about a good corporate board, not everybody on that board has the same job. Somebody might be responsible for compliance. Somebody might be the sales and marketing guru. Somebody might really know a lot about the industry. You're trying to pull people for different reasons. And I think similarly, we want different roles for our personal support structure. So when I say personal board of directors, I'm saying there are folks that are going to be your cheerleaders, and they might not actually know what you actually do, but they're down for you. You have other people who can open doors. You have other people who you can brainstorm with. You have other people who, will challenge you. So it's not necessarily going to have one person who does everything, but folks can be a combination. So for instance, I got a couple buddies where we talk about the future and trends and new ideas. That's a very different conversation than, you might have with mom and them. And, they're going to say, you doing it, congrats. But they may not really know the depths of what you're doing, but they're still giving you that emotional and structural support. And so I really look at all of those pieces as the foundation. To your specific question, for me, I've learned to kind of look at support structure professionally kind of in 3 buckets. You have your coaches, you have your mentors, and you have your sponsors. And your coaches are going to be the folks who say, here's a system or a framework. There's not one size fits all, but here's a system that maybe worked for me, or that's something that you can apply. The mentor is going to say, all right, whatever system you're using, let's talk about your real scenario. Like, what happened this week, this month that you're trying to tackle, right? And so they trying to role play and solve problems. And then the sponsor is the person who is going to use their social capital to really, go out on a limb and connect you with someone. They're not just going to give you advice. They're going to say, you know what? I'm going to use my network. I'm going to use the people I know. I'm going to open a door for you. And I find that it has to be a combination of all 3 of those to really get it to work. And putting a finer point on it, for me, early on, I got introduced to, or I met a guy I was in the military with, and he believed in me and kind of, gave me a small check. At the time, it seemed like all the money in the world. Is like $5,000. He said, LaSean, and like, he didn't have that much money, right? He gave me $5,000 to go start a business. I'm still great friends with that guy today. And then that led us to to this conference that we attended. I would never have been at that conference if not for him. There, I met another brother that's now a lifelong friend, and he turned me on to the whole game. I didn't know how money worked. I didn't know how capital stacks work. I didn't know how any of these things. And we serendipitously met there. And then throughout the game, almost every step along the way, meeting that first person led me to a room or an environment to meet the second person. And then by the time I got to the 4th or 5th person, I had like found that magic. And I think that's, we all have different destinations, but that common journey of, you need, these coaches, mentors, and sponsors to kind of get to the next level, I think is a shared journey.
I think that's great. I think it's the people you meet, places you go, and all that's, wrapped up in what will kind of guide your path. Now, to that point, I read on your website, I think in one of the blogs you posted, there's a term you have called solopreneur.
Yeah.
So what is that? I mean, I'm guessing it's a business of one, but
Right.
is that simplifying it too much, or what is Solopreneur?
No, not at all. So a lot of times if you hear the media or big companies talk about different types of businesses, they'll say small and medium businesses and then big business or enterprise, right? They just try to make it super simple. I've learned if we really want to get actionable, there's maybe some more precise labels. So I have this term I call a very small business, a VSB. So that's a company that has 20 or less employees. And then we have the solopreneur. And yes, it's one employee, no W-2s. Now you might have contractors or freelancers that you work with, but you are the only person who is there day in and day out. And the reason I get super excited about solopreneurs is there's a whole new class of tools that were not there back in the day. And so, 10, 20 years ago, you just would run out of time in a day to be selling the product, marketing the product. When I say that, if you're doing direct sales or if you're doing, organic marketing, maybe you got a podcast or you have, you got a YouTube channel, you're doing all sorts of blogging. Like now you actually got to go make the product. Now you got to go do customer support. Like you can't do all of these things, the old way with one person. But increasingly, whether it's with digital tools, it's technology, it's using contractors, it's using platforms where you can outsource certain things to vendors, you really can build a business of one. And it's not for everybody. So I don't pretend like that's the path everyone should follow, but it is a path. And where I get really passionate about is helping folks figure out, all right, what's the problem you're solving for your given community, for your customer base, and like what are all the tools where you can be more efficient. So if you do want to run a business of one, that makes sense. And I'll put a little asterisk on that. If someone is just, let's say you're a freelancer, and you kind of bounce around working for different contracts, to me that's not true solopreneurship, because true solopreneurship is, and that's a fine path, so I don't have anything against that path, but if we're just being precise with the labels, true solopreneurship is you're trying to build a business that is valuable even when you don't show up and do any work. And it might take months or years for you to get to that point, but it's really about building an asset, not simply saying I work by myself. It's like I am going to build an asset that can generate income even when I don't show up in the future.
Is it something that, so your company and with you, are you helping the companies build that? So a solopreneur or a small company, is that something that you will help them build and take them to the next level, or what is it?
So before you answer that, LaSean, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, so I know you've been in tech. I think you were with Amazon and Microsoft, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But your company now, as you have, is CAGR Investments. Is that correct?
Yeah, CAGR Investments stands
CAGR
for
Investments.
compound
So-
annual growth rate. Yep.
So what does your company do? And then you can answer.
Yeah, and that kind of connects to Frank's question as well. So the anchor, what I realized is there are folks who have no capital available to them to start their businesses, right? And they're just trying to navigate the world without a plan. And many times, and we could hit on this quickly, there are ways that you can tackle a business and you might not be as capital constrained as you believe. I think the number one way or the number one gap that folks have when they're developing their business is they're building their business backwards. They're building a product or a service, then they're trying to figure out how they're going to market it, and then they go figure out if anybody wants it. And like, that's backwards. You should go figure out if anybody wants it, then figure out how you're going to market and sell it, and then you go make it. Right. And so I have this simple rule. If anyone wants me to invest into them, I want them to go talk to 100 potential customers. I'm not talking fake conversations, like a legit 100 customers. And around customer 37 or 42 or somewhere around there, people will realize the product I thought I was going to sell is maybe not the best product. Right. And so back to your question on what my company does is, number one, I try to create a top of funnel, a population of solopreneurs and very small business owners who need capital. And so I get them in shape. And once I feel they're in shape, I invest in their business. Or if they've been running a business for a little while and they're burnt out, I try to figure out a way to invest some capital to allow them to have some relief so they're not as stressed out. or if they want to walk away from the business, sometimes I'll buy the business outright. And what I'm doing is called private equity, but it has a finer name. It's called micro private equity, because I'm buying really, really tiny companies, right? They might have three employees. Like, these are really small, but I'm buying equity in the business in exchange for cash. And so for me, it's really simple math. I'm looking for businesses that don't have a great marketing engine. They are maybe running inefficient. They got too much paperwork and they need to digitize things. And I just kind of look at it and say, can I invest cash to make this company more efficient? And if so, what I do is spend a lot of time researching new industries, talking to people on the phone, looking for what they call deal flow. And then once I find a potential business, we'll go into a due diligence phase, while I'll spend usually not too long, usually single-digit days, talking to the owner, trying to figure out, can we come to terms on a price? And I'm just buying small businesses. And so that's my whole play is, anybody out there who is looking to sell a small business, I buy small businesses. Anybody who's maybe not quite to that point, I spend my time on free calls, on podcasts like these, just talking to people to get them in shape, so they're at a point that in the future they can sell. A lot of companies, they're not worth buying because folks haven't gotten the company in shape in the first place.
So
Is
you're a
this
Shark
the
Tank.
Shark Tank model? Yeah,
You're a Shark Tank.
It's similar to Shark Tank, but typically on Shark Tank, what they are doing is to say, you're at point A in your business. I'm gonna give you some cash to get to point B, C, or D. My model is a little different in that somebody might say, "Hey, I've been running this business. I got it past point A. I'm at point B, but maybe I'm getting older, or maybe I got a different life stage. I had a deal where somebody had a health issue, and they're just like, I just can't keep doing this because I got responsibilities and I got to take care of my body." And so there are different reasons where somebody actually might have to move away or walk away from a business. And sometimes they're selling as they say, a bad sandwich. It's not actually a good business. And so that's part of my job to go figure that out. But yeah, so it's similar in that I am investing cash in exchange for ownership in the company, sometimes 100% ownership, and they're walking away. Sometimes they'll keep 5 or 10%, and that's helpful for them because they get cash and they still own a little bit of it. So as it makes money over time, they can still reap some of the benefits. But these are small deals. The smallest deal I've done is $50K. The biggest deal I've done is $3 million. So these are not massive size deals in the private equity world. There are, it's not uncommon to have, billion-dollar deals, right? But 9-figure deals happen all the time. So I'm the baby version of that. But I love it because I'm at the spearhead of empowerment. And for somebody who is been working a small job and they never knew how they were going to get out of it, if I come to their business with a $300,000 check, that can be transformative.
What are you doing? Are you normally just flipping let's say if you go into 100% ownership, are you looking just to flip that business, or are you looking to actually run it, or what is your end goal with that? Because if you're
Yes.
buying multiple businesses, it sounds like you would look to just flip it.
Yeah, so I run a model called permanent capital. And what that means is I'm putting dollars in and I have no time horizon on when I need to sell the business. So that means the business has to work because it's profitable, not like hopes and dreams, right? And so in all of those cases, I bring on operators to be, the titles will determine, are kind of determined by the size of the company. Sometimes it's a director of growth and operations. Sometimes it's a GM, a COO, all the way up to CEO. And so depending on that role or title, their job still is to go run that business. And so those folks stay in place there. And then, I won't say never, but we don't currently have anything in our portfolio where we need to sell it or we're looking to sell it. So I do deals where there's enough cash flow showing up that business can just spit off cash, and then I use the cash from there to go buy the next business.
And LaSean, how long have you been doing this? the private equity funding?
Yeah, so I've been doing deals for about 15 years, but I was working in big tech and other things. And so I didn't start my actual own private equity firm where I was leading until about a year ago. So I've done, prior to that, I'd done about 30 some odd deals. This year, I've written 12 checks. Again, these are very small checks. And again, the goal is just, this sounds crazy, but I'm buying cash.
Yeah, no.
And anybody out there can do this model, like a quick hack for folks who are like, well, I don't have a ton of cash to play with or to start with. There are all sorts of programs. The SBA actually just this year refined the rules where if you have a qualified business, and there's two parts of this equation, the business itself has to go through a review process with a bank and the SBA, and then you have to go through a review process with the bank and the SBA, and you can buy a company, and the SBA, the government, will basically co-sign your loan. The way you might get a FHA loan or something like that, they will co-sign. Now you can only do one of these, and you got to be the person running it. But if you're like, I don't have a lot of money, this is a great way to start. And you'd be surprised. I mean, there are businesses for sale for $120,000, and with today's rules, you can sometimes buy these businesses for 5% down. And then there's a whole, just like real estate, there's so many parallels to this in real estate. If you're familiar with seller financing on a piece of property, there's seller financing on businesses. So somebody might have a $500,000 business, and they will actually finance it where you could get in that business for no money down. Now, why would somebody do that? If somebody, let's say somebody's 72 years old, they've been running this business for 25 years. I love these local businesses, like roofing companies, landscaping companies, power washing companies, laundry, especially table service, doing like the napkins and the tablecloths at restaurants, like the unsexy businesses, right? And there are plenty of these folks who they're aging out of the market, but their kids and grandkids don't want the business. So the alternative is they just got to shut it down. And so they are willing to basically give you all of their knowledge and all of their invested, their customer base and all those types of things in exchange for you dealing with the day-to-day headache. And now you're going to pay them every month or every quarter until you pay off that, that financing. So there are a lot of ways, if you're willing to put into work, to go buy these businesses, even if you don't have a lot of cash to start.
Well, let's talk about that. So let's say someone did want to do that, go that route. So from your experience, what are the things to look for when you're looking to acquire some businesses, and how do you find them?
Sure. So let's start with the latter part. There's some solid brokerages on the internet. Quiet Light is one. There's a really popular one called Biz Buy. Is it Buy Biz Sell or Biz Buy Sell? It's one of those two. But Google will correct me if I'm wrong. There's a ton of inventory there. Now, just like most of the internet, there's a lot of duds on those listings, right? And so what I usually recommend folks do is anything that's a franchise, you can filter out. If you're into the franchise model, there are better ways to go do your due diligence to find a franchise that might be right for you. So you don't usually go to these brokers looking for franchises. Anything that is a business that hasn't been around for at least 2 years, filter it out. Right? Because a lot of what you're trying to do is to figure out like how stable is the cash flow in this business. And if they don't even have 2 years of tax returns, you have that's a super, super risky business to buy. So those are some of the places that you can find these. Also, if you just, sometimes I just get in my car and there are people that I'll be like, what do they do over there? I'll hop out and be like, I love to speak to the owner. And just getting in your community, guaranteed, if you just go shake the hands of 20, 30, 40 people in your neighborhood and you say, I'm interested in buying a small business, they might not be the person, but you're going to quickly find
they may know somebody that knows somebody.
Yeah, so it's kind of like driving for dollars for people who might wholesale homes or other types of things. Like sometimes it's just not going to be on the internet. You just got to get out there, and you're going to know your local market. So you're going to know, more things about that business. So that's how you might find some of what they call the deal flow. As far as how you do the diligence, like I said, minimum 2 years of tax returns. I'm looking for things personally that are 10 years old or more, right? because that means they've had a lot of time for things to go wrong. There's something called the Lindy effect. It means like the longer something's been around, the higher the likelihood it'll keep being around. And so I'm looking for businesses that, they got a decade of experience. That also means that their employees, even if it's only 3 or 4 of them, the local community, like people know this business, right? So you don't have to come in and like invent things from scratch. Another thing I look at is how organized are all their documentation. Do they have a solid bookkeeper? Do they have like, really clean records? Can they go point me to some folder on Dropbox or Google or something that says, this is how we organize everything? Or is it like, now back there's a file cabinet and like, that's where we got all the paperwork. And so I'm just looking for all of these signs on, what's the health of the business beyond the financials. And then lastly, and sometimes this is the most important, I want to talk to whoever the customers are or the employees are to kind of figure out, are these folks in it for the right reasons? Because you don't want to buy it and then half the team quits, right? There's something called a key man clause, and you can actually work this into your contract. You can say, I'm going to pay you, let's say $300,000 for this business. But if these named individuals leave in X amount of time, you don't get the payout. And so that contingency, you may have heard a term called an earnout. This is where somebody doesn't get the whole 300,000 up front. They might get $150, and then you pay the 150 over 18, 24 months. And it's contingent on all these things being true. So these are all ways that you can, find the deal, you can assess the deal, and then protect yourself so the deal doesn't get out of control. You give somebody, 300 grand and they run away with the bag and you got no company.
So man, okay. So and it's so funny that we even talked about this today, because I swear to you, I was talking about it at my employer, and I won't say names or anything. So I'm gonna give you a scenario.
Yeah.
I've been with my employer for 5 years roughly, and when I first got there, that summer they had actually been purchased by an investment company, a private equity company. The owner of the company, he had it for 15 years at that time, and I guess he wanted to do it. And so we had employees there. We had always talked from that point. Hey, this company is about to get sold. This company is
Mm-hmm.
going to get sold. 5 years later, this company, this equity company, is still owns us. Now the CEO is he's on the board of directors of the company now,
Yep.
doing probably just collecting a check. So my
Yeah.
question to you is, when you go into a company like that, are you looking to sell it? And how does that CEO make money by partnering with you?
Yeah, so there's 2 questions in there. I'll go through these quickly. So number 1, for me, again, I use this the concept of permanent capital, and the reason that's important is I won't buy a deal that doesn't cash flow. Again, using the real estate comparison, you could buy a property for appreciation, you could buy it for cash flow, you could buy it for a combo. And we know if you buy it for appreciation, it's probably in a nice neighborhood. There's some trend that you're betting on. If you buy in a B or C neighborhood, maybe there's not a lot of upside in appreciation, but you can always rent out that property, right? And that's a big difference between like a startup and these simple companies that you might buy with private equity. I'm all about the cash flow. I'm not trying to buy hopes and dreams, right? And so by doing that, it's just like I said, it's a math equation for me. And then I go see if the humans are good people. And that's how I can determine if I want to buy the business. Once I make that commitment, I don't need to sell because the dollars I'm putting in are not on a ticking time bomb. Most private equity, they have to flip because they've raised money from their LPs, their limited partners, and they've made a promise. They got a fiduciary duty that says in 3 to 7 years, I got to flip this because that's how they get their money.
Mhm.
Typically in private equity, the general partners, the people managing the fund, they get paid what's called a 2 and 20. So every year they get 2% fee for the money they're investing, and any business that they sell or distributions they get 20% of that, right? I'm simplifying it, but that's the general math. And so when your your former employer, when he sold the company, typically what he gets is an upfront piece of cash, and then he gets some percentage that he gets to hold on to, and then every quarter he gets a check. whether he
Mm-hmm.
does anything or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing I'll underscore, this is like a huge opportunity in America right now. There's a company called Team Shares, and I don't know them or have any affiliation other than kind of some of the stuff they're in the news about. But what they've been doing is buying companies and then letting employees buy back the equity. I think that's a really fascinating model. And then the last point to your question, how do I compensate the people that I hire? So if I go hire a CEO, well, they don't actually own the business. I own the business. So why are they motivated beyond their salary? I use something called phantom shares. This is a old legal throwback that's been around for many years, and now folks have kind of modernized it, brought it back. And basically what it is every year, and this is how a lot of law firms and big consulting shops work anyway, every year you as the CEO or whoever the person I'm giving phantom shares, they will get a percentage of the profit sharing units. And then as long as they work there, they get more of those units every year. And so they are highly incentivized because all of the profits are distributed. And this allows me to give what looks like equity in the short term to anybody. So they're making the cash. But if they decide to quit at some point, those phantom shares go back to the pool and I can go allocate them to the next person who takes that job.
How do you do a win-win situation? So let's say if I'm in you alluded to wholesale real estate, and that's what I dabble
Yeah.
into as well. So if I'm looking for a landlord who's been in the business for 40, 50 years, has 20 properties, and not necessarily looking to get rid of all of them, but looking to get rid of a chunk of them, let's say half of them.
Mm-hmm.
How do you look at that and say, all right, this is a good deal for me? And what makes you how do you go in there as far as negotiation and saying, okay, you know what, I see you have 20 properties, that's $20 million in net value, net worth, excuse me, and I want to buy half of those. But you of course are not going to go in there and say, yeah, you have 20 million and half of them would be worth 10.
Right.
You're not going to go in there and offer 10. You're probably going to go in there and offer 3 or 4 or something. What is your process of negotiation? If that's not giving away too much information on
Yeah,
your
no. Like I said, man, I'm all about sharing. There's no magic here because most people aren't going to go knock on the doors, build the
Mhm,
relationships, and meet the folks, right? Like this is why, like, there's no shortage of these opportunities.
mhm.
So for me, in addition to the diligence things that I talked about already, once I find a deal, one of the things I try to do is, I'm pretty good with numbers, but I'm not going to trust LaSean. And so I will go pay my CPA to go do a breakdown on their books, right? And they're going to charge me somewhere around $500 to go do that. So it's not a lot, but like I need a second set of eyes to go double check and say, you see anything fishy in these bank statements or any of these, financial documents. So sometimes the invoices will be a little wonky and be like, and any CPA worth their salt could go figure that out, especially if they've done any forensic accounting. So that's the first thing to make sure I'm not getting into trouble, missing something obvious. To your
It's
other
almost
point
like
on
buying
like,
a car.
what's that?
It's almost like buying a
Yeah,
car.
yeah. Like you wouldn't buy a car
Mhm.
without Carfax or whatever the,
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
equivalent is, right? So it's very similar situation there. But to your question on like how do you make it win-win? For me, most of this is about timing. So it's not about is this company good or bad. You should be able to assess that it's good and dump the duds. So then it's like, well, why does somebody want to sell a good company? And you're looking for folks where timing is an issue, right? This is why, like I said, health issues, life stages. Um, you know, I know folks who have bought businesses where the business was too small. The CEO like thought it was going to be something major, and they're like, "This is never going to be massive." So I'm just going to sell it and go start my next business. So there's all sorts of reasons for why somebody would do it, and so you're looking for a motivated seller for a good business, and again, that comes down to timing. And like I said, one of the ways you can really make it win-win for the seller, the person who started the company, is you're trying to find a way to not pay all of the cash up front and pay them with some type of incentive. So maybe they know a lot about the industry and they need to hop on some of the calls, and you negotiate, hey, I need you to be available for 3 calls a week so the handoff is smooth with your existing customer base. Or I need you to, when we get stuck, to kind of look at some type of report, and maybe I don't know much about that. All these different things, you're trying to figure out how to make sure there's kind of a baton handoff that's smooth, and it's not wire the money and then they out. Like, you want some type of coverage, and the best way to do that is to give them part of the cash up front, so they have a liquidity event, and then they stretch it out over time. And usually it's not crazy time, right? Like, 18, 24 months on the low end. And then there's some folks who they want to keep 5, 10% of that forever. And when they pass
Mm-hmm.
away, they'll just give that 10% to their family.
Mm-hmm.
LaSean, so I know you said your background is tech and media. So when you're looking at businesses to purchase, is there a sweet spot for you as far as industry? Do you like to stick with tech, or is it just you look for anything that's going to be a good business to buy?
Yeah, so I believe most folks should stick to what they know. What you know is your experience, your value set, and your skill set. So those are in line with mine. Specific to your question, I focus on what's called SaaS, so software as a service. So these are subscription software businesses, but I specifically focus on vertical SaaS. So I'm not trying to compete with Salesforce or Oracle or
SAP.
Microsoft or any of the big players. Like,
Yeah.
I'm looking at things like GovTech, where software for local government, or prop tech, things for the construction industry. I'm looking for very specific pieces. So that's the technology focus that I have. And then I look at local B2B businesses here. I've been on the hunt for an insurance company for quite a long time, property and casualty, commercial real estate insurance companies. So, I'm not interested in buying a State Farm or an Allstate. You can find those for sale all the time. But there's not a lot you can differentiate there. So I've been looking at, all these businesses as commercial real estate is getting, it's just in a funky place right now. Those buildings are going to get sold for cheap, but guess what? They're not going to let the buildings go in disarray, right? They're still going to insure them. They're still going to have a, janitorial service. They're still going to do the outside, like they're still going to keep all these things up. But when that business sells, just like with a house, that's the opportunity to go switch their providers, right? And so I've been looking for a commercial property and casualty insurance company. And again, I'm looking mostly for folks who are aging out of the industry rather than other reasons.
And of course, you don't use your own money. It's that other people's money method model that a lot of people use. Do you have a lot of investors that are with you in your equity team, or are you actually using your own money to buy
Yeah,
these
I have a
companies?
little different system because I don't have to return my capital that quickly. I don't need to have a deep pool of limited partners. And so currently, I invest my money plus capital from two limited partners. There are family offices. And so, for folks not familiar with that, they're high net wealth individuals who have enough money where they basically create their own system to manage their money, manage their reputation. And so a family office will typically have people in-house for a family that invest their money, that does PR. It sounds crazy, but it's just like, let's say one of your nieces gets in trouble and is going to make the family look bad. They got somebody in-house to go handle that. There's a real
Hmm.
estate deal that they want to go get into. They got an expert. There's public equities. They got an expert. There is venture capital or private equity deal. They got an expert, and they have relationships and they manage these things in house. And so they look at different types of assets. Everything from hard property like real estate, public markets and equities, all the way to like art and collectibles. And so these are really wealthy people, typically have a net worth over $100 million, and they're organized well enough where they are not just putting their money in the public stock market, and they're looking for other areas. So I have two of those families that I've known for quite a long time, and so they provide the capital alongside my capital, and that allows us, because of the terms I've negotiated, that they're not rushed to get their money back. They just want to make sure that the quality of the businesses are high.
Do you ever? So last, and I'm sorry, Jay, I'm fascinated right now. Shit. um, so one of the challenges that I had is when I started the wholesale real estate game. When I got into it full fledged last year, I noticed that I was competing with a lot of hedge funders, and I was
Mm-hmm.
losing those bids because those people who were if I'm going in there and I see a home for 200,000 that I could offer, a hedge fund is going in there for 105, 100, maybe 110% over the value of the property.
Yeah.
How does a company make money from that?
Well, there's two ways. So the reason, number one, that can work is because we were in something called ZIRP, so the zero interest rate policy that we've been in for the last few years. We also had a period of that in the '08 downturn, but that
Mhm.
allowed those hedge funds to raise money really cheap. And they basically, doing what's called a DCF, a discounted cash flow. They could run the math that says I can overpay this because the cost of capital, I basically got a loan for 0%. So they're working the delta of that into the price. And so they just had we used to call them spreadsheet monkeys. They'd have somebody just like typing away in a spreadsheet and they spit out a number. And whether it's 103% or 107%, they'd come out with a number and you'd be like, all right, that's what we'll do. And they can do that in volume, and they're okay because they've done, there's something called a Sharpe ratio. I know I'm throwing out a bunch of finance terms, but there's something called a Sharpe ratio, which lets you manage your risk. And so it's not so much, is this a good deal or not? It's like, how risky is this deal? And they've built what they believe to be financial models to go do that at scale. Now, that doesn't mean they get it right. They're playing with other people's money. And so a lot of times they're overpaying and they never recoup, but there's no recourse because they were using someone else's money. I think your question was then like, how does that maybe apply to some of these opportunities? And, what I look at is, you just got to be apathetic and not emotional, because there will be deals that somebody else will overpay for, and you just got to let it be. So this is no different than real estate as an asset class. And in fact, I think it's maybe even more dangerous for your emotions to get caught up, because you might really like the seller or you might really like the industry, and you'll be talking yourself into like, oh man, I could own this. And then, I'm gonna sponsor all the little leagues, and like, I'm gonna take over my neighborhood. Like, it's so easy to tell yourself a
By the
story.
block.
And so you got to like really remove the emotion from the process, and you got to do a lot of reps. What I tell some of the folks that I mentor is, if you haven't looked at 30 deals, you had no business writing a check or going to a bank for an SBA loan. Like you need to see enough of them so you can start finding your own pattern.
This was great, LaSean. I mean, it's very, very informative. This is why I like doing this, because we meet people like you. We learn things that are just new, especially to us, and it's just great. It's networking, it's learning, it's community, like you said. So
no, it's dope, man. I will say before we wrap, for me, sometimes I get caught up, and you hear me dropping into kind of the industry language. You can erase all of that stuff. This is like, most people can learn the basics of this in about 40 to 60 hours of time. Like, this is not a complicated business.
I was going to ask, where do you learn stuff like this? I mean, I know you went to school for 2,500
Man,
years.
don't listen to these classrooms. These classrooms have very little practical application. You know what I'm saying? Like, most of what you can learn isn't that great. But what I'll do is I'll send you all 3 or 4 links that you can drop in this episode, and folks can follow up. I would say start with the free resources, then move on to the books. What I love about books is you can take 20 years of someone experience, and then for $15 and 8 hours of your time, you can like get all of that goodness, right? And so you don't need to be buying a $3,000 coach if you don't even know what you're doing. I have nothing against coaches. I think it's a great accelerator. But if somebody's like, I'm buying the coach, and they haven't read the books, I'm like, you're doing this out of order. So I think that's the path. This is about limited time, and if you really want to focus on this lane, it's just untapped, because there are so many baby boomers who are retiring, and there's if you're a millennial or a Gen Xer, you're flooded with opportunities. If you're Gen Z, maybe you don't have enough capital or life experience to know where you might target. But if you're somewhere in your 30s or 40s, like, it's go time.
I'm only 42, so
oh, here we go.
You in the game. You in the game. Come on, Frank.
42, and I don't know dog years, I guess. But
yeah, I just turned 50 last week,
Let's
2 weeks
go.
ago. So, man,
But that's the beauty of this. Like, we all have a bunch of experiences, and guarantee you know something that somebody else doesn't know. I call that the talent stack, right? And when you make that's what's going to allow you to see a business. Like I said, be careful, get a lawyer, get a CPA. Don't try to cheat on those types of things. You need an expert, but it turns out those types of experts are not that expensive in this case. And so you have no excuse not to do it the right way.
No, I like what you were saying about, the books and the resources, because if you go online, YouTube, social media, everybody is selling courses. Everybody is selling a course.
Udemy, is it Udemy or whatever?
I mean, every individual person with some kind of expertise is selling a course. I'm like,
exactly.
You take the course.
$60 worth of books will change your life.
There you go. Right there. Just read a book. read some books, man.
That's the game.
Yeah.
That's the game. And on that note, we're gonna get up out of here. But LaSean, man, much love. Appreciate you coming on, brother.
Damn.
Great to connect. Great to hang.
Great.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
We
go Chiefs.
Hey, go Hawks in the NFC. All right, that's cool.
Hey, you know what? Like, we done found some common ground here, Frank.
Yeah.
I like that. I'm gonna be clapping for y'all in the AFC.
That's right.
And we take it from there. But
I
y'all
like
enjoy
Smith.
yourself. Keep pushing, and love what you're doing.
Yeah, bro. Appreciate it.
Hang out for 1 second, LaSean, when we close out of here. But on that note, Big Frank.
Big Wood.
Hey, you know this. Can you move on, y'all? We out.
D-Town, LA, NO, Florida, Mississippi, KC, MO, Show 'em what you stand for. Show 'em what you stand for. Show 'em what you stand for. Chi-Town, Tennessee, Carolinas, Alabama, Oakland, St. Louis, Detroit, Atlanta. Show 'em what you stand for.